Okay, well, thanks, Mike, so much for sitting down with us today.
Sure.
We would love to hear a little bit of history about the Mirror Reporter.
Well, the history of the Mirror Reporter, let's see. We like to promote the Mirror Reporter as your hometown newspaper since 1869. There were various different names for the Mirror Reporter. There were, through the years, it started out, changed a bunch of different owners. You know, some of the unique things about the Mirror Reporter were that back in the days of just pre-Civil War, there was a gentleman over in Alton, Illinois, who was a newspaper man, and he was basically he was an abolitionist, and he was, like I say, he was kind of on the border between North and South, and the anti-abolitionists rioted, I guess, and took him prisoner and ended up killing him and threw his press in the Mississippi River. And the press eventually was taken out of the river and refitted and redone, and actually it came to Clear Lake, and that's what the newspaper in Clear Lake was printed on. You know, so you can say a lot of people call this editor in Alton, Illinois, the first casualty of the Civil War. So, but it's just I'm just kind of getting away from the history of the paper. But at the time, you know, older times too, there were two newspapers in the city of Clear Lake. One was the Mirror, the other one was the Reporter, and they both had, or one had a Democratic slant, the other one had a Republican slant. But back in the 50s, they decided to join the two, and that's how the name the Mirror Reporter came together. I bought the paper in 1983 from Mid-America Publishing, and it's kind of ironic that you know, now in 2018, I end up selling the paper back to Mid-America. Right. So I had owned the paper for 34 years, and you know, I guess my claim to fame is that I've owned the paper longer than any publisher and that's ever had the Mirror Reporter. So I'm pretty proud of that. You know, I think that we've always had a really good newspaper, and you know, the community has a lot to do with that. The community is very supportive. Has always been very supportive of the newspaper. So I've been very fortunate. But it was a tough decision when I decided to sell. But you know, some circumstances like health play into it, and you know, a new grandbaby, to that kind of yeah, wanting to spend some more time with grandkids, and so anyway, that's just kind of a brief history.
Sure. So been around for a long time in Clear Lake. What kinds of trends did you see over the years in the newspaper industry and with your own operation in Clear Lake?
Well, it's been very interesting. When I was in college, I graduated from Iowa State in 1973, and I graduated with a degree in journalism, and my emphasis was in advertising and public relations. And one of the requirements at that time is that you had to work for 3 months in your field before you could graduate. And so I went to the Charles City Press. That's where I grew up, and I worked there in the advertising department at the press. And at the time, the press was still being printed with linotype. You know, it was the old fashioned. You had a keyboard in front of you that looked somewhat similar to a typewriter, but what it did is it fed letters down. The machine itself took up about a whole room. I mean, it was just huge. It worked on hot lead, basically, and in the linotype keyboard, people would sit and type, and the letters would come down, and you know, that's the way we did advertising too. Is if we had cuts or artwork that we wanted to use, we had to go to They were kind of like a cardboard piece, and they were hollowed out, and they had this artwork, and you'd fill that'd be filled up with hot lead, and wow. So when I bought the paper in 1983, I was kind of used to that system. I mean, not used to it, but that's the only system that I ever knew. Mm-hmm. So when I bought the paper in 1983, we had CompuGraphic machines, and those were again a keyboard, but the hot lead was long gone, and it was still a huge machine. I mean, it was still huge, and what you did is it had a big, more or less a flywheel on the inside that had a negative strip that had letters on it, and you'd type say a particular letter, and a beam of light would shine through the negative onto a strip of film. And so we had to take that film then, you'd take that film, which is in a protected box, and you'd run it through a processor, and it would develop this immediately. And then it was all wet though, and you had to put it on a drying table and dry it, and then you had to put it then you had to run it through a waxer, so it had a backing on it, and then you had to take an X-Acto knife and cut it out, and you'd lay it on you'd have your layout sheets on the layout board, and you'd put those up onto so you do an entire page that way. And at the time, like I said, I came from a period of the tail end of working with this hot lead to this, and I thought this was the greatest thing in the world. And from there we advanced. We went to computers. And we started with Apple. And Apple at the time was the primo, the best system available. And we were actually one of the first papers in the state, weekly papers anyway, to go to computer. And computer obviously just changed everything for us. We still had to do a lot of the printing and the layout, a physical layout of a page at the office. But then it transitioned into, we started to do things on the computer. As the computers advanced, we started to be able to put together a full page or something on the screen, and we could look at it on the screen instead of having to lay it out on a board. And then we would send it down to the printer, who our printing has always been done down in Hampton. And we'd send it down via electronically, and they could take it directly from there, put it onto, they would go to pre-press, which would take it directly from what we would send them, and it would put it onto the plates that they would wrap around the press, and so it has changed. It's changed quite a bit. We've seen a lot of changes in 34 years, and it seems it's amazing to me that it's changed as much as it has from 34 years ago to now. It just makes me wonder what's going to happen with the next 30 years.
Right, easier in some ways and harder in other ways, I imagine. Yeah. Fortunately or unfortunately, I won't be there to see it. I'll just be able to sit back and look at the product, the finished product. Right. Well, can you also talk to us just a little bit about what you think the Clear Lake community meant to the paper, what it has meant, what it, over all those years, what was the impact of the Clear Lake community to your business?
Well, the impact of the Clear Lake community meant everything to me. I absolutely loved and still love Clear Lake. I mean, what a fantastic community. Like I told you, I had grown up in Charles City, and I could always remember, we'd come over to Clear Lake summertime. We'd come over, and one of my friends, their family had a boat, and we'd bring the boat over, and we always wanted to come over to Clear Lake because they always had the best looking girls over in Clear Lake, and fortunately I ended up marrying one of them. But like I said, the community itself, I mean, I can't really express how fortunate I feel that I ended up in Clear Lake. I mean, there are communities throughout the state of Iowa that would give their left arm to have this beautiful 3,200 acre lake that we have sitting on our doorstep. So I think that I owe just about everything to the community. Really, the newspaper owes a lot to the community too. I mean, we're very fortunate, like I said, to have this, and I can't think of a better place to be.
Well, the paper's been very successful for many years. Is there anything else outside of just the people in Clear Lake that you would attribute that success to?
Well, obviously, the biggest reason I think for the success of the newspaper is the staff that was there. I told you how fortunate I feel to be in a community, in the Clear Lake community. Mm-hmm. But I also feel fortunate to say that the staff that I had, mm-hmm. while I owned the newspaper, they're the ones that made the newspaper. Mary Ann, who was my editor and still is the editor, she was hired right out of college. She was with me from day one. She's probably the face of the newspaper. I mean, she's the one that's out in the community more, and everybody sees Mary Ann. I mean, whether it's at sporting events or city hall, council meetings, and everyone knows her. She's just an amazing person. To be able to week after week after week to be able to sit down and put out a 20, 30 page paper, it just amazes me. I had other people too. I mean, I've had people like Kathleen Toole and Michelle Watson, that have been with me for a long time. Some of those, like I said, Mary Ann had been with me from the beginning, which was 34 years, and Kathleen and Michelle have been there like 20 and 18, I think it's a tribute, I guess, to them liking their work, mm-hmm. and knowing what they're doing is important. Because they obviously could have gone other places, but they've decided to stay at the newspaper, so yeah, the staff is what has made that paper really what it is, and I'm so glad that they decided to stay on with it, because they're the ones that know how to print and how to produce a community newspaper. Right. So I'm, like I said, they're the ones.
Lots of good people.
Yeah, very.
So anything else that we didn't touch on today that you want to talk to people about at the gala that evening? Anything that we missed?
I really don't think so. Like I said, again, I keep saying this over and over again, but I truly do feel fortunate to live in this community. And I guess if I would say anything to anybody that is in Clear Lake, if you've been here for a long time or a short time or whatever, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. But I guess I would just say, I hope that you never ever take it for granted. It's such a wonderful community. Mm-hmm. It is. It's such a wonderful community to do business in. It's such a wonderful community to raise a family in. Mm-hmm. We have a little slice of utopia right here, I guess, and just always appreciate it.